Hey, Anthony. Thanks for getting your stuff up on YouTube and in a playlist, no less. Makes it very simple to go through everything. All right, so let's jump in. Okay. So, first of all, lots of very good things going on in throw, and a couple of things that we can make some tweaks on relatively quick and get you some more distance. Like, you're already throwing very well. Like you said, you shot like 13 down on your home course. That's nuts. It's better than my personal best. That's really solid. But we can get that lower. There's more distance to be had and probably more consistency also. But you're already doing great. So things that I really like your walk up. Maybe some steps could be smaller, but not a biggie. I like your X step. It's not too big. Again, it could probably be smaller, but we'll get into that in later videos. Um, your front toe ends up a little too open sometimes, or most of the time. It's hard to tell on these back shots, but on the side ones, it looks pretty consistent. I like the nice, relatively small X step on this one. I like the angled walk up coming from the back corner to the front corner. Which are all very good things. So see how the plant toe, your foot's going to plant just a little too far open, and that's really going to hurt your ability to brace and your distance. Off arm is a little bit late, but that's really not a big deal. Everyone worries about the off arm a lot. And then there's at least one pro that like his off arm just cruises on through pretty much like yours, and he still throws like 500, 600. So the off arm just doesn't matter as much as people think. The other big thing that I saw here is your brace foot. So you're reaching out, you're coming down with your front leg pretty straight, which is not good. And then your knee kind of bends forward as your leg continues to give, and then you start pushing and resisting the ground. That's good, but it's happening too late relative to your weight shift. So you're pushing your hips up instead of your front hip going to the right. I mean, your hip will go up, but you're pushing it up too late. We'll go over this more on the other clips. Maybe it's better to actually play this for you. So just look at the front foot. A little hop. So I would call that a midfoot pivot, because you're not pivoting on the ball, you're not pivoting on the heel, you're kind of hopping and losing your ground contact, and that's when your turn happens. And then there's a little more pivot. It doesn't matter. But a midfoot or a ball pivot, according to Yerke, who does some coaching for me, he says he doesn't really care where your foot pivots. I think a heel pivot is really important because it makes sure you're getting your bones stacked in the right way, where your bones can do the work of stopping and moving the front hip back towards your behind and making your brace really solid. So your brace isn't solid yet because your toe is pointed forward, so your knee continues to give and your hips continue to drift forward during the whole throw. We'll loop back to that point. Yeah, so we would rather see, we'll do that on the side views. It's better on the side views. Looks like my mic is a little quiet. Push it a little bit harder. Try to speak up. Okay. So this one, same stuff, but we can see your legs better. So let's look at the toe first. So that foot is toe forward here, and toe forward when it plants. So that's not helping. So like Seabass calls this horse stance, but it's not horse stance. It's like a pyramid stance. Nope, that's not what we want. keys are challenging. Get you back to that spot. Call it there. So this is, I call it pyramid stance for obvious reasons, right? So this foot is too far forward. This foot is maybe okay according to some people, including Seabass, but I really want to see, for the changes I'm suggesting you make, get this one to 90 and get this one to 90. The rear foot matters because with the toe back, your knee is going to extend and this leg is going to end up straight. You don't want that leg straight. So your legs are the same length here, and your rear leg used to be more bent. Mere fractions of a second ago. Well, that's not even really true. So with that last little quickie pause was the problem. So you're kind of just tipping forward on this leg, and it's not really getting longer or shorter. It's just staying the same length. But then because your heel came down, which we don't want to do, your leg, as the heel lifts up, right those two frames. So here your pants move, your shoe doesn't move. Interesting. And then here your heel starts to come up, and then more of that. So your hips are here, and then as you're coming into your brace, your hips drift to here. So you have hip drift coming closer to on top of your brace foot. This is bad. There's nothing wrong with it. Like the way that you throw and the way that you balance, especially your lower body, looks a lot like Ken Climo. There's a video highlight of all of his throws on some course a number of years ago, because he's been playing forever. But your throw looks very like his. He ends up he probably has a front foot pivot just because he ends up with his torso leaned forward over his brace foot the same way that you do. And his rear leg looks like yours. So go look at him for a little bit, just for fun. He obviously a very good player. He won a lot of things. His name is on a lot of my discs. But I don't think his throw is optimized. It worked very well for him. I think it has a high degree of accuracy, but he's missing out on power. And if you really get the brace working in a way that he didn't ever really strive for, then I think the consistency can come back through the brace. So he got consistency by having a fluid release, but it's the way I think about it is kind of like he's throwing from a moving platform, whereas top players now like Eagle and Drew and Simon are tending to have a more aggressive brace, stop more of the momentum behind the brace, converting it all into rotational and throwing from behind the brace. So Climo kind of threw like off of his front leg in a way. Not that I want to use terms like that, but it's linguistically it makes sense. Okay, so back to you. Enough about those other guys. So the pivot here, the same midfoot pivot, which if you're really getting into your brace and stacking your bones right, you'll just get a heel pivot. That'll be the only thing that makes sense. Again, nothing wrong with the way you're doing it, but your hips are lifting up on top of the brace and your shoulders come forward too much too early. Like it works, it's fine, but if you want to add distance for sure, and then I think get easier consistency on the accuracy, let's think about making a change on that. So the stance, yeah, let's look at your stance, the pyramid stance thing again here. So here, X step could be shorter, initial step could be shorter too. So the thought there being, if you're carrying, the reason you'll end up too far forward with your hips stacked vertically over your brace too much is because you have too much momentum compared to how much stopping force you have on your brace. So if you make this step and the X step smaller, so instead of this step landing here relative to your back foot, if it, landed there, that would be cool. It would make it easier to get your brace to do what we want. And then here, if this step wasn't here, but was maybe half of that, then you'd have a lot less forward momentum in the hips moving into the brace, and you'd be less likely to end up here and more likely to end up with a shorter leg in the back and a longer leg in the front. So here, your brace is here in this hypothetical scenario, and your hips are further back from the brace. So this angle being sharper, more acute, if I understand words, helps you keep the weight back behind. If this angle gets too far up, then the ground force can't push and contain your hips enough, and your hips are going to drift that way. So the model that we want is the brace foot is here, the hips stay back, and all of their rotation is completed in this spot. So your hips will go forward, 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 the plant engages, and they stop and hang out here for an instant while all of your rotation happens. And then your follow through and your rear leg coming around is what tips you back up to vertical. So you're just progressing from here to vertical, and then your torso leans forward like Ken Climo. So not wrong, just not optimized the way that people are throwing these days. Okay, so on to the next video. Let this one play out just for fun. A pretty good control. You're not blasting off the front of the T-pad. That is good. Okay, next one. I'm going to check my notes real quick. Yeah, okay, well, let's go back to that one. There's more there. So we looked at your lower body a bunch. Let's look at your upper body a little bit. So first note I have is just your reach back position in general. And then we'll go over a timing issue here on one of the next vids. So this is okay. Check it frame by frame. It's okay. So I want your reach out to kind of be on this angle here. I'd like to see your elbow a little straighter, not the end of the world, but while you're learning the timing, focus on getting that elbow straight because it'll help. But players like Simon and I think Eagle don't always straighten their elbow, but they have a million miles of distance and they don't need to. But while we're learning, full extension is helpful for moving the timing in the right direction. So I'd rather see the arm straighter and stay on that line. But as you come forward, the disc drifts behind your chest a little bit. So assuming you're throwing straight off the front of the T-pad, the disc is getting a little bit behind you because the elbow bend is starting. So reach back position in general could just be a little more crisp. I will demo that for you. It's easier to see it than talk about it. And then because of that, because you have a slight rounding problem, like we all do, and it's maybe related to your offhand being late, I suppose, that you kind of end up a little shruggy here. So what I mean is that your spine is no longer centered. You're tipping forward a little bit, like your shoulders are more forward than your hips. And this angle is a little too pinched. So I'd rather see your elbow out more in front of you already. So I'll get you a link to the deeper pocket drill. It will help with that. I guess it is a drill. It's a video and a drill. Yeah, so you're shoulder shrugging and leaning forward too much. Again, that's related to where the weight is. If the weight gets forward, the shoulder wants to go forward also. Yep. So reach back position, shoulder collapse, and spine lean. And this is where I started to feel like you are throwing a lot like Climo, because he ends up in that like good internal rotation of the rear leg to allow the hips to come forward, and then this is where Climo ends up. Like I think that's the silhouette of his signature in a lot of places. Okay, so next one. This is the one where I, having seen your X step enough times, I was like, okay, maybe the X step needs to be a little shorter. Um, Not because it needs to be, but because that will set you up for making the brace more functional a lot easier. So this step doesn't need to be that big, and the X step doesn't need to be that big. What was that? Click the wrong button. So like there's nothing inherently wrong with those steps being too big. You just don't need that much momentum yet, because feeding less momentum into your brace will make it easier to learn the brace. And then when you have good brace mechanics, then you can up the momentum going in and get more power. But you have to, those two things have to level up together. So right now you have too much momentum and not enough brace. So rather than keeping the momentum the same and just making your brace better magically somehow, let's bring the momentum down to match the power level of your brace currently, while we make your brace more efficient. And then we can stress test the brace by increasing the momentum slowly and intelligently, and filming often and checking that we're not messing it up again. So shorter X step here, and then this is where this is a good video to see your constant forward hip progression. So I'll just frame by frame, and your hips keep moving forward the whole time. All right, so pull up a video of someone like Drew Gibson and go frame by frame like this. So on YouTube, you can just type in Drew Gibson slow mo, and something useful will come up. And you can use I don't know what those symbols are called, the little alligators that eat numbers that are bigger than other numbers. The keys that are the comma and the period on your keyboard are your frame by frame scrubbing. So do this looking at Drew, and you'll see that like right here, bam, his hips stop. So his hips don't move anymore from this point. All of his rotation happens without his hips drifting forward, and then only this leg coming around is what tips him back up to this position. Whereas your hips move forward consistently the whole time. So they're coming forward on the X. There might be a little hitch here in someone who's really balancing on their back leg well, but your hips just drift forward the whole time, even while you're bracing, they're drifting forward. So conceptually, that is not what we want from our throw. Okay, so moving on to the next one. And this one, I started to see a reach back timing a little more, and I want to add one idea of a pump on the disc that matches and opposes your X step. So we'll let it play through for context. Again, I love the walk-up angle. It's perfect. So here, so conceptually, what we're going to do is we're going to tie the disc to this foot. So as the X step foot goes forward, the disc will also go forward. So this leg will want to pull the hips this way and rotate to where your belt buckle is pointed more at the camera, and your disc will oppose that and pull your shoulders forward. So it'll keep the hips from rotating too far back. And I don't think you're rotating your hips too far back, but it'll help the timing. So I use this pump to correct when beginners turn way too far backwards and end up walking backwards. You're not doing that. Your hips look good, but your timing, it would help your timing, because you're late and you're getting to, what do I mean by late? That's not productive. You're not late. Your reach back is early, or your reach back is too soft. I want your reach back to be pointy. So just looking at your rear extension with your throwing arm versus your plant foot, so you don't have extension. Your throwing arm just kind of stays there, and then it rounds a little bit, which is fine, but it's not ideal. And then here, when your plant engages, the disc is coming forward. Is it coming forward before that? Yeah. So I'll have to demo that for you. It's real hard to explain. But you want, from this bent elbow position, again, look at footage of Drew throwing. He's really good at this. So he rotates backwards. He coils backwards in a bent elbow position, very similar to you. And then as he's approaching his brace, he extends the elbow and twists the spine a little bit more, so that he's like, I don't want to use the word punching, but he's pressing the disc out right before his plant heel engages. So the pump will help set up your timing better, because it'll allow you to make your reach back more, I don't know, more pointy, more percussive. So your reach back is soft. You're coming up to it. So if this is kind of a weird graph, but if this is your peak reach back position, you're kind of, and then time goes this way on the graph, you are starting here, you're coiling back, you get to your peak reach back position, and then you're coming forward. Whereas Drew Gibson goes, he's coiling back, he's coiling back, he's coiling back, and then he decides he wants to extend, and he extends, and then he comes forward. So yours is very soft. Your graph is very soft, and Drew's graph is very pointy. So more power can be preserved here. So you're not getting any stretch shortening reflex on your reach back, whereas Drew gets a ton. So we're not going full slingshot double move here, but there is something to that way of thinking. It's not the end all be all of the throw, but the stretch shortening cycle does apply to your reach back. So I'll demo that. Hopefully it'll make more sense with a demo. Make a note. Demo, what do I want to call it? Stretch shortening. So the stretch shortening cycle, or stretch shortening reflex, is a thing that happens in biomechanics. And I'll try to remember to go over that in the demo section. Okay, so next video. And I'll demo the pump for you too. Oh, and there's one more thing on this one. So check out your front foot again. Oh, same little hop. So there's nothing wrong with that. Some pros do that when they throw really hard. But what it means is you're de-weighting your brace because of the way you're setting it up. So your hips are lifting up too much as you come into the brace. So if you get the front foot out farther in front of you, not that you need to take a bigger step, you should probably actually take a smaller step, but you want your weight to stay more on the back foot and your pressure to shift into the front foot. That'll make more sense in the demo. All right, next one. So that X step looks smaller, but it probably isn't. It's probably just perspective. So these first two steps could be shorter as before. Same things. Front knee bends a little too much. Your hip motion after, once your brace is engaged, is very good. You are pushing the hip up in the right direction and clearing it to the right. But we just want that to happen earlier relative to when your hips come forward over the brace foot. So we don't want your hips to come forward over the brace foot. We want the motion you have to happen when your hips are still closer to your rear foot. And then on the upper body, off arm a little bit late as before, which contributes to your rear shoulder. So you're not spinning around your spine so much as leaning your spine forward towards your throwing shoulder. And then everything lifts up as you release. But in general, really, really good motion. Just got a couple little mechanical tweaks to make to get everything working quite a bit better. And then the last couple, I didn't see anything new. It's pretty much the same stuff. I'll speed you up a little bit and just watch them for completeness. Make sure nothing else sticks out now that I've gone through this twice. So toe angles are killing you. And then look at this. You were going to set down on a 45. And then in the last frame, you turn your toe open. So the toe leads the knee, leads the hip. So this front hip is already open, and it really can't do its job yet. So I need to get you a link to the longest thread in the world. On Disc Golf Course View, the weight shift from behind you, which is the most annoying phrase in the world. If I just say weight shift from behind you, what are the chances that you are going to parse that correctly linguistically and know what I'm talking about? They are 0. So it's not a really good phrase, but it's I'll go over that in the demo section a little bit. Make sure to do that. And I'll get you a link to that thread. There's a bunch of ball golf videos. And I think I'll just, I have a video that I did, like kind of parsing a video that Sean Clement did from that thread. So maybe I'll just make that public so that you can see it and other folks can see it as well. It was not something that I intended to ever release publicly. I just made it for a friend who was asking me to translate Sean Clement's stuff into disc golf. So maybe that's productive. I'll get you that one and we'll see if it helps at all. But let's jump over to demo mode and get you some demos. Okay, so we have a million things to demo and very sloppy notes about them. So bracing in general, we'll shift from behind. We can do the pump first and reach back. Yeah. Okay, so let's start there. I don't want to give you too much. How are we doing on time? We're already at half an hour. Cool. Okay, so we'll go quick through this and on your checkup, ask questions about anything that doesn't make sense. So the pump is kind of the easiest one. So if I'm throwing this way, initial step, X step, disc is here, X step, you start drifting this back and you end up like here with a little bit of rounding. And then the off arm stays here too long and you start coming forward and you get a little here and a little too pinched off here. And then because this is late, you want power, so you open, and because you don't have containment on the front foot, this is contained. I'm going to hit and stop if I'm here. If I put this toe forward, now I don't have containment, and the only way that I can feel powerful is to shrug the shoulder and come over my brace too much and try to smash down a door with my shoulder. So we don't want that as a model. So all of these things are very connected. Just by changing the pump, we can help address all the later issues. So what I want to change is initial step. As the X step comes forward, I'm going to pump the disc forward. So that changes my timing, because if I let the X step control my shoulders and turn, now I'm reaching back way early, right? And then I'm going to pull from here and be even in worse shape than you are. But just by adding a pump, so as the X step goes behind, the disc comes forward. And this is exaggerated. Look at Paul McBeth for this. I think he does this pretty consistently, this thing. And that's probably where everyone got hung up on. Front hip has to go high. It doesn't matter where your hips are. It matters where your feet are. You don't have to do something weird with this hip to make your step small. You can just make your step small. And your hip will go where it goes. Doesn't matter. But just the pump helps regulate all of the things that are going to go wrong. And then with the disc here, now it goes back as this foot goes forward. So then I'm more likely to punctuate my reach back like Drew does and have the heel tied to coming to full extension and the disc starting to come forward. Whereas if I stay here, it's going to be a lot easier for me to bicep curl, which I don't want to do. This is not good. You want this. So you're driving the elbow forward and the disc comes in on its own. Right? So hopefully that makes sense. Pumping forward, and it can be small. It's just keeping the disc here so that you have time to get to there. And then as far as the reach back position goes, you're kind of ending here. I want you to get even more open. So my shoulder to my disc is not entirely in line, but it's close to it, right? So lots of space here gives me some wiggle room that when I come forward, I can not end up too pinched off here. I don't want my bicep to be too close to my pec. I always want my elbow in the correct orientation so that it's going to keep the disc on the plane if my elbow drops down and my shoulder rotates internally, externally. External rotation, internal rotation. If I have too much external, then when my elbow bends, nothing's on the plane of the throw anymore and we get wobble, right? So elbow up and nice and open in the shoulder. Maybe we should talk about the offhand. Okay, so that's the pump. The stretch, yeah, let's do the stretch shortening and the punctuation of rear extension. So if you keep the disc here and then throw, there's no force added at the back of extension. Whereas if I throw like Drew and I come here and then I go, so I'm coiling into this leg with no elbow extension. And then as I start to go forward into my plant, I extend out. Boom. There's a bounce that happens back here. So I'm loading my arm, my entire kinetic chain here, at the instant that my heel hits starts to affect my front hip, move my front hip back, which creates hip rotation. And then my spine adds to that. And then my shoulder adds to that. And then maybe at an advanced level, my tricep adds to that. But so you want to load that kinetic chain here, there. When the heel comes down, that's when if you had like a door frame that you were pulling on, you want to tighten that whole chain as the heel comes down. If you don't tighten it, then there's no energy in the chain to start with, which means you're not going to throw as far. So that's the stretch shortening thing. Racing, yeah, let's jump into bracing. How are we doing on time? 1 million minutes. Awesome. So bracing, you're getting your front foot turned toe forward. Doesn't work. Why? Because here, all that can happen is the reason you're hopping is because you don't have anywhere to go. You don't have a good way to rotate. The only way to rotate is to come up on the ball, right? So if I go here, as my weight comes forward, I'm going to be on the ball. If my weight stays behind, I'm going to rotate on the heel, right? Not that we want to do this. Nope. But if my weight is staying here and I rotate the front foot it's going to be on the heel. It's very awkward to do this, right? So what we want to change about the brace is think about, so we're going to make a big change to make sure we move the needle, right? Because if you don't move the needle, you don't make a change, you don't ever change your muscle memory. So rather than just trying to get to a flat 90-degree foot, we're going to commit to the idea of getting your heel a little bit forward. So this is an exaggeration. You don't need to go anywhere close to 45, but maybe at the start to get the feel of it, you do. So the problem starts the step before. So initial step, X step, if I turn this toes back and then I align to that, which you're going to tend to do, from here, the only way I can really feel like I get power is to open my hips, and then nothing works and my brace is set up wrong. So initial step, X step, keep this on a 90 because this will allow you to keep this X step leg short as you come into your brace. So I'm staying on the ball of this foot. I'm not letting the heel down, because when the heel comes down, then you want to extend, and then your hips are coming up into the brace. We don't want our hips coming up. We want our hips going down into the brace. So it shouldn't feel like you're just tipping. This leg is static and you're tipping down under the brace. So then my force is going down, my momentum is going forward, and I end up drifting on top, right? So this leg is supposed to make your weight drift and glide laterally, not down, into this foot. That's all the back leg has to do. Yeah. So what does the front leg have to do? Have to do. This leg is carrying you forward. You have a good offset, but you're just going to focus on keeping this knee that way, the hip closed, and the heel forward. So your toe is going to set down first, and then you're going to rock into the heel. That will change the way the brace feels a lot. So don't do this at full power first. Start really slow. So just like do 1 steps and just that. And you'll feel a lot more stop here. Like if I do this, there's no stop. My knee gives and my weight comes forward and I end up climbing it. Nothing wrong, not optimized. So when I get the heel forward, now there's a big old stop there. You might feel tension in your IT band. You might feel tension in your glute medius. That's good. Don't overdo it. Give those muscles time to get used to that force and get stronger. Ice skater jumps can really help get a feel for this. So do some of those before you throw, because it's literally that's what you're doing, is stopping using this part of your hip. So just getting the heel forward will allow you to start using your leg correctly to brace. And then the other thing to be aware of is just knee safety on this. If you do this at 1,000,000 miles an hour, it is entirely possible to blow out your knee. So please start slowly. If you feel any pain, stop, reassess, ask me questions. If you feel any pain, definitely throw a knee brace on. It helps me. But the biggest thing you can do to help keep your knee safe is the first thing we want to work on is this idea of toe to heel. So it's not that you're going to set everything down and then mentally decide, okay, I feel pressure in my knee. I should probably pick up my toes now. You don't have time for that, right? So we want to automate that process to where if I commit that I'm going to set my toe down first and then commit all my weight to the heel, the pivot is going to happen timed somewhat correctly on its own, right? Because my weight is here. My weight isn't going to go to the heel and stop. It's going to go to the heel and rock through. So that's my pivot is built in, right? So I get a certain, and there is a timing window on that you can do it too fast or too slow, but pay attention to that. That's kind of the first thing you want to set up is if I rock too fast, I'm not going to get enough stop. So the stop happens when your ball is down and your heel is down. But once that stop happens and my rest of my body pivots into my brace, the timing should automatically make you pivot in a way that keeps your knee safe. So ask questions if you need to on that, but that should get you started. So I think that's all my notes Please ask questions if you need more clarity on any of that. But in general, your throw is looking good. You're doing the Climo thing. That works. But I think tightening up the brace, taking the heel forward will help a lot, and changing the reach back will help a lot. One more quick little teaser on the offhand stuff. So an idea that a friend pointed out recently in his throw is that he feels like the offhand really helped him make sure he was rotating around the spine. So if you're not rotating around the spine, right, you'll get this, where you're rotating this way on the hips. Feels powerful because you're using a bunch of big muscles to move the thing, but we don't need to move a bunch of muscles. We need to use a bunch of muscles to stop the hip, get the hip rotation to happen on its own, and use that to power the sling whip. Totally lost my train of thought. So what we need is a brace, because a brace allows us to stay centered and have all the rotation happen here instead of here. Yeah. All right. I think that's about all I got. Ask questions. Looking good so far. Get out to the field. Give it a shot.